Morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to join you this morning for telling tales and selling stories, because our next hour is all about messaging. And for architects, that storytelling, that messaging, it comes through your words, it comes through your context, photos, and visualization. So we're going to try to cover a lot of ground in just this 1 hour. How you can present your stories of your designs and your spaces through thoughtful and carefully curated content, through using words and visuals to sell your ideas to various audience groups. I really want this hour, it sounds like, to be more like a conversation over cocktails, except it is 8:30 in the morning, so maybe over coffee, though Matt has probably had his Bailey's Irish Cream in his. But we've invited some talented architectural creators and collaborators to share their experiences and expertise with us. So you will be able to see Paul Vu, Henry Gao, and Matt Bowles. If you look at the ones in black, all the architects and all the creatives have their black on today. But we look forward to hearing from them a little later in the hour. Interaction, connectivity, conversation. Let's get this breakfast party started. And I want to let you know, we're going to have a few minutes for Q&A at the end of our event. But if you have a real burning desire to ask a quick question, use the chat feature, and I'll try to look over every once in a while, and we'll try to include them if it's very, very quick. Now, today we are focusing on the message, and we have some learning objectives. But for me, it boils down to 4 things. Number 1, you need to know and understand your audience, because that audience changes with every presentation that you have. Then once you figure out your audience, you should understand the words that go with each of these audiences, the context that changes with each different set of eyes. You're going to see in our presentation how photos can change because of a different audience. And then visualization, what enhances, what cements, what sells that idea or project to reality and realization. Again, it is all about messaging. The picture is worth 1,000 words kind of messaging. So let's talk about words painting a picture. I mean, face it, architects have their own language. I mean, when you attend design school or architecture school, you start learning this vocabulary, and it's a new language. And sometimes you get out of school and you tend to speak that language that maybe I or other people may not fully comprehend, and speak the language as fluently as you do. Architects are visual people, maybe not always called on to find the right words. I mean, most of you aren't professional photographers either. You just communicate at a much different level. I mean, sometimes it's a level about 30,000 feet above everyone else. Let's take a look. This was an article from Arch Daily. It's an online publication. They did a fun article about 6 years ago, polling their readers on the weird words that only architects use. It's kind of informative, but it's fun because they're making a little bit of fun of themselves. So on one side, you have someone who's saying, go ahead, use the big words. We don't have to simplify for our audience. And then the other one says, well, look at it this way. If people don't understand it, they won't understand our work, and they won't care. So give them a reason to care. I could say there's a quick show of hands. Who identifies with the left quote? Who identifies with the right quote? Well, that's good. But here's the thing. You have 2 opposing points of view, and both are valid. I mean, both are right. And we're going to show you why in some of our examples. So bottom line, it depends on your audience. Who is your audience? Say, maybe you're building a library. Are you trying to sway the community? Maybe you're trying to collaborate with a builder. I mean, the public, you need to have them like you as much as they actually like the design. So think about using language that your audience understands. And again, that audience changes with every presentation. Think about what group you're in. Do you feel like it helps your project if you're using the language of architects, or do you need to simplify it for another audience? Again, it can be right in certain circumstances, but I think for our purposes, I want you to see how flexible you can and should be for your audience. I mean, think about it this way. Do they like your project? Do they like you? Why should they care? And number one, do they really want to work with you? So I'm looking in this hour to inspire you, to inspire them with the right words to create a vision of a perfect collaboration. This is about the message you are the author of. But as an architect, again, you're going to take it to the next level. You will build what readers can only imagine. So if you, what do they say in Gladiator, the movie Gladiator I watched a while back, if you win the crowd, you know, you win your project. Words, painting a picture. I want to show 3 examples of how words can paint a picture, but you know, this picture may not be what the speaker or the person selling the design may want the recipient or audience to imagine. Okay, take a look at this. Maybe somebody says, the skin will be clad in metal, which will patina over time. Now, if you're speaking to the community, maybe you're selling that library project, for example, talking to the community meeting, somebody who has no knowledge of this language might imagine, oh, okay, maybe he's thinking about, you know, something like the Tin Man. You just don't know. I mean, let's go to this next slide, because architect speak can often go over someone's head. The first time I read this one, take a look at this. The first time I read this, I quickly found myself stuck on what exactly the word interstitial means. I mean, it just didn't come to me quickly. And, you know, once I get stuck on a word, I might never hear what else you're trying to tell me or the point you want to make. In Arch Daly's 150 Weird Words, they define it. And these are other architects making fun of themselves. They say, almost always attached to the noun space to denote spaces between things. Architects are fascinated by interstitial spaces, even though almost by definition, they serve no purpose. They're having fun with themselves. And then I go down a rabbit hole and I spend an hour looking at all the funny words. It's a pretty great article, so check it out sometimes, because there are some really creative and witty architects out there. All right, how about this one? This language might work at a presentation with colleagues and other architects. Maybe you're speaking at the AIA National Convention, but yet again, this is architect speak that might not resonate with the general public. So again, know your audience, have trust and confidence in your preparation to know that you're not dumbing down your presentation, but what you're doing is caring enough to connect with the person or the people you'll work with, or the person or people who will want to hire you. So we saw these 3 examples. Let's kind of take a closer look at them. I mean, they're all valid, but you know, sometimes you need to translate them to the right audience and in order to make an impact. So let's see how that same message can be translated to a different audience. And I want to find an interpreter. Is David, are you here? David Hurley? David's an architect. Hi, David. How are you?
Good morning.
I see the big D there. David, welcome. David is an architect who has managed complex science building at the UC campuses. He now works on commercial real estate projects with VRF advisors. David, hi. Okay, can you take a crack at explaining one of these statements, say, for someone like me who maybe doesn't speak architect language? I mean, how would you translate it to a general audience? Which one do you want to take?
I think I'll tackle your favorite one that you got stuck on, the interstitial spaces. Okay. Stands out to me in an interesting way. Okay. But you know, same thing. Even having been in the industry, it's sort of a word salad to some degree, especially if you're communicating with an outdoor external audience. I would interpret that to a lay audience, perhaps in a way that would say, the rooms that you will spend the most time in will open to the exterior garden of the library or the park. So you can have direct connection and move from indoors to outdoors.
I would definitely understand that. I would definitely understand that. You want to take a crack at any of the other ones?
Oh, Lord. let's see, the skin will be clad in metal, the Tin Man. Let's see, the skin will be, well, let's say, let me step back a second. The exterior of your building will be clad in a durable material that will last for a long period of time. And as a process of that over time, it will patina, which means that it will age gracefully and take on a deeper material, expression.
Yeah. I mean, it is, it takes some time to do this, but you can see how you would sort of massage the message for the audience, that you have. If anybody wants to take a crack, I'll look at the chat and see. But, when we look at this, it's just very, very interesting to see what you can do with words. And it's like the slide before that about the Le Corbeau. I mean, you can, architects would instantly think about this building, that, the height, the bicycle, it doesn't feel overwhelming. I mean, it's approachable. It's just take a look. When you look at your words, understand how they affect the audience that you're presenting to, because it's so important. So, whether your audience is residential clients or, an awards jury, put yourself in the audience's shoes, be approachable, like the Le Corbeau building, be approachable, but not overwhelming. Think about these questions. What language do we need to use to inspire people to take action? Does it speak to me? Help me care about you and the project, and just keep refining it. Give me a mental picture, but it has to be a mental picture that works for me. Maybe not the Tin Man, but but something else. Give me that mental picture so that I can imagine it. So how about tailoring to the medium as far as proposals go? All of you in some form or fashion have to present. Whether it's to the public, whether it's to a potential client, to win a project, they're a big part of business development and client interviews, and so important to your, to your industry. You want to make those presentations work for you. Maybe do double or triple duty. Let's take a look at one particular photo that is a good example of how designers can showcase their designs and themselves. Just want to let you know these slides were provided by Michelle Gale. She is the founder of Spatializing. She's in our audience today. So Michelle, welcome. She's a licensed architect and an interior designer. So on the left slide, you will see she uses this slide as part of a PowerPoint presentation, and it was recently to AIA Los Angeles. You see, it's clean, it's simple. She is talking to this slide. The attention stays focused on her discussion, on her, while the viewer is immersed in the possibilities of that particular design. So I want to get into the difference now between a presentation slide and a leave behind, because the one on the right would be the leave behind. She spoke to the slide on the left, but then Michelle, as she explained a little bit about the project, what she did is she used the same project slide on the right, but this time as a leave behind. So a PDF in a presentation or a booklet of her projects, but you can see that it has more information on it. It has what I call the next layer of the onion. That's something someone can sit and read, whereas the other one commands the attention of the audience. They are focusing on what she is explaining there. And really, it becomes, you can imagine the possibilities there. Now, the photo I like is interesting because it really shows a slice of the project, the layers, what designers, I guess, would call layering of spaces. You have the conference room, that's an indoor room, and then you have the lobby area that opens up to the outdoor area. And it really is a nice way to showcase her expertise, design expertise. So it enables Michelle to really create two different messages with this one photo. Bottom line here is, don't make your audience work so hard for the information. Again, think of it as a layer of an onion. You leave them with information after you have given the presentation, but let them, while you're presenting, virtually immerse themselves in the picture and be part of your project without forcing them to do the busy work of reading it. I mean, if she had that slide with all that information, you'd be so focused on trying, oh, it's small print, trying to read it, that you would not really get anything what she was saying. So it, one on the left is the slide for your presentation. The one on your right, it's a takeaway. It's something you can leave behind for them. Okay, let's take a quick look at messaging on how photos can be tailored with messaging, because photos are so important in the architectural world. Let's take a look at one project. It was photographed by 2 different magazines, Architectural Digest and Enki, which is more about the architect's story. We're all familiar with Architectural Digest perspective is lifestyle and the owners. And let's go through 3 more examples of how the same image is photographed differently for each particular audience. Okay, here's a nice picture of the house. One house, same house, one photo. Architectural Digest composition, the lighting and styling are different. Styled it. You see plants, you see the dogs, you see the different lighting conditions. Then with Enki, which is more sort of the design and architecture, it's for people that might be familiar with this magazine. This is the style of photo that they have throughout the magazine. It's moodier in terms of how it's lit, the composition. I think it's more dramatic. It makes the lines of the house stand out more. It's really intended to tell the architecture side of the story and less of the lifestyle side of the story. Same with the kitchen, same room, photographed differently. Architectural Digest has the bonsai plant. It's spare, but just the addition of the plant seems to change the vibe of the room and just the composition of the space. And in the other photo, you see the kitchen up close. I mean, you are just so focused, for me, on the lines, the symmetry. There's nothing that's breaking all of that. It is about as clean as you can get. Everything seems perfectly aligned. You notice they sort of kept the light on to draw your eyes to the cabinetry details, which it doesn't really do it in the other shot. It kind of gets lost. And finally, let's take a look at the pool. Same general area of the house. You can see the pavers on both. On the left, the homeowner, the dog, continuity of styling. The dog is there. That fella, that's his home. He happens to be a Colombian superstar. Very nice house. And I like his blue hair too. The other photo, the woman might just be there to show scale. I mean, her back is to us. She's anonymous. So maybe it was just intended to show scale. So, my takeaway here is knowing your audience is so important to selling your story and your project. If you were showing a project like this to a potential homeowner client, a residential client, then you'd go with the AD type photos. If you're having to talk to the client's architect or the builder or something, or you are considering submitting something for an award submission, then it might be more the photo on the right. So again, who is your audience? Give them a reason to care. Use the visuals to tell a big story in a short amount of time. And again, edit to engage. How do you tell the same story from a different perspective? I want to stay on that same theme of edit to engage and bring in a pro who really understands photography, editing, setting the right tone. Paul Vu is joining us from the Here and Now agency. And again, this is the next layer of that onion to find out how it's done, to get into the details. So Paul, welcome. Your job is to engage the audience through visuals. And I just want to let people know this particular photo won the AIA Los Angeles Architecture Photo Awards this year. So Paul, welcome. And tell us, talk about the backstory for this award-winning photo called The Louvre.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. This image was taken right before the pandemic. I was visiting for the first time in the UAE, and I was very excited to see this project. And it's, obviously it's the Louvre, Abu Dhabi by Jean Nouvel. It's in the UAE. So for me, coming into it, the cultural context was very, very interesting, very important. It's a French institution, French architect in the Middle East. And the building does not present itself very transparently. It's like the scale is incomprehensible. It's just this massive, gorgeous object. And so some of the photos I took tried to communicate what was happening. And some photos like this were more about the materiality and some of the ideas, but they don't show you how the space works.
And tell me, all right, you cropped it like this to see the, it's just, I'm so defining all the different parts of it. This is what we see, but what did we not see in the photograph? What did we not see? What did you say, this doesn't work for me? It's still beautiful photographs, but say the next one that we're looking at here.
Yeah, so, the objective with these two photos is very different. I treated this almost like an assignment where sometimes, we have photos that we do for AD and we have other publications that we'll run as well. And, judging on the different styles and who the publication will be, we tailor content for that so we can do exclusives. So in one day, we could shoot multiple ways. And so this photo shows you more about how one of the buildings of the pavilion sits in the landscape. It's a wider shot. Again, the space is just massive. And so it's really difficult to communicate unless you're further back. But this shows you the articulation of one of the pavilion buildings, whereas the other one really just showed you materiality.
They're all beautiful shots, and you shared one more with us that is I think that's just such an incredible, beautiful shot. And this is again the ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this one's a tighter, much tighter shot, and it's even more, abstract than the other two. And it was more just about the qualities of light in the ceiling. I mean, there was no way to have somebody no way that I could do it, make it happen, have someone like a cleaner or somebody up there at that time to show scale. So it's kind of amorphous. You have no idea how big it is. And I just want to celebrate the way the light comes into the space.
I wanted to go back to describing your work. I would say visual content, but you're not just a photographer, are you?
That's right. I mean, I started as an architect, I trained as an architect, so I kind of always have that approach, but was always interested in storytelling and narrative. And so we try to combine this lifestyle and other elements to drive our work for a broader audience so that architects can communicate, beyond just the profession. We do some video work now, some short format video, and we also do renderings.
You have the architectural background, but you also work for major lifestyle brands. Can you tell us where we might see some of your work?
I mean, mostly we try to do a lot of work for architects. It's been primarily in Los Angeles, but it's expanding nationally, internationally. And some of the other clients we picked up more recently are like fashion labels like LVMH. So we work for Dior. We do a lot of work for them, photographing the installs in stores so they can see what's working for them and what's not. So we report to Paris. And on the other hand, we do a lot of nonprofit work for, transitional housing and many of the homeless NPOs that are in Los Angeles to balance it out.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can you share one or two tips on how architects and designers can use photography principles, composition, lighting, and cropping for their own presentations?
Absolutely. Before I approach anything, even if I'm on vacation like this, I want to know what time of day it is. It's really easy to do some studies in places like Google Earth now and sun calculators to see how the light will be. Obviously, if you have access to the site and is closer, you can just drive by and you can visit a couple of times and see what happens. What else? Compositionally, just try to take a range. Like these first two shots are wider shots, and the last shot, looking up at the ceiling, is, you know, a tighter shot that just focuses on one element, that isn't trying to connect the ceiling with the other components. So I like to do a mix of wides and tight shots.
And how did you decide? I mean, the first picture that won the award. I mean, all of these are absolutely beautiful, but you know, what drew you to select versus any of the others?
I think you know, a big part of it was the former architect in me, honestly, and it's just trying to. A lot of the preference in the imagery for architects is single point perspective, so you get a sense of an ability to quantify the image. You could look at the panels and see how they fit together. It's a little bit objectively less dramatic. And, you know, it really just gave you a palette of the materials and leads your eye around. And obviously, you know, there's the cluster of women walking across in their hijab and abaya, and one just happened to be looking over, and it made the image really playful. And so a little bit of less is more in this image.
Well, it is stunning. So that is great. Paul, thanks so much. Listen, stick around for our Q&A. I want to bring you back into the conversation when we talk more about visualization. So after speaking with Paul, you know, what can you take away for your own presentations? I would say, you know, use this as a guide. What kind of emotion do you want to elicit? How are you going to compose your message or your rendering, your image to get what you want? How might you use photography like Paul's to capture the spirit of the project instead of sort of getting caught in the weeds of detail? Can you find that one perfect, beautiful part of that image and not get your clients distracted by this other detail? And another thing, consider bringing in a fresh set of eyes, someone cognizant of the current trends, but maybe striving for timeless quality. And that's where finding someone like Paul to come in, or someone outside. I mean, it takes a village, it takes a team to really bring fresh sets of eyes to things and see them in a different fashion. So speaking of teamwork, let's take a look now when you talk about visualization and standing out from the crowd, to better, you know, focus on our visual message. I've invited an architect with his own firm and an architectural illustrator that he has collaborated with to talk about this collaboration process. So I want to welcome Matt Bowles, who is the co-founder and principal of Amalgam, and welcome to Henry Gao. He is an architectural illustrator and founder of 16 by 9. And in fact, I just want to give a big shout out to Henry. Has his own YouTube channel. Henry, you'll have to remind me what the name of it is. The Architect. What is your YouTube channel called?
It's just my name.
Oh, it is.
Gao.
Okay, all right. But he has one video, 10 tips for better architectural drawings right away. Perfect for architects. So you should probably check that out. But Matt and Henry, welcome. Both of you work together for a design competition. And so let's talk about that particular project. First of all, how did the collaboration come about with you two? How did you find each other? Matt, you want to start on, you know, I mean, you could have done this in-house.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having us, Sydnie. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, Henry and I worked together at an architecture firm before Henry kind of went out and started doing his own thing. So I think we kind of had a head start on collaborating together. In this particular instance, this was a competition that we were working on. And so, you know, you've got a really compressed timeline and you have not a lot of staff hours to put on it. And so we'd kind of gotten it to this point that you're looking at here and realized that, you know, we needed some additional help. And so we kind of combed through our network and we're looking for people that were passionate and willing to help us out and, you know, kind of had the skill set and the magic that we needed. And Henry was the first person we went to, and we're really happy we did.
And what sort of eyes did Henry bring to this? You know, and you talked about resources too, but what do you feel like he brought to the table here?
Well, I think Henry is very talented. I think he's got an art background in arts as well as architecture. So I think he's kind of a beautiful hybrid in that sense. You know, oftentimes when you're working with like a contractor, maybe they are skewed more towards the art side or maybe more towards the architecture side, and it's tough to find somebody who's right in between. So with Henry, it was great because he understood what we were trying to do architecturally and then was able to translate that into kind of an artistic output through Photoshop. Yeah.
Well, I mean, right now we're looking at this rendering, which to me looks perfectly acceptable. But Henry, why don't you describe what you did once Matt brought you in?
Thanks, Sydnie, and Matt for the head start. Earlier on in my career, I worked with a lot of architects who either had in-house rendering capability, but were maybe missing some magical touch from their in-house staff. So what I offered in my service before was either to start a rendering from scratch myself. So I take their model and I do the rendering and the post-production myself. In this case, Matt and their staff actually provided the background render, which was kind of crude and was missing a lot of entourage. So my task was to take that and make it into a very attractive and palatable narrative for their competition. So it wasn't really the realistic approach that we were looking for. It was really about how do I communicate their design that kind of evokes a sense of emotion rather than having a realistic rendering. So I mostly just took this background into Photoshop, where I added people, vegetation, additional textures that weren't made in their render, and kind of married everything together, adding my magic sauce, if you will, to make everything pop a little bit more. And this was more on the creative post-production facet of illustration rather than the technical aspect of how do I render this to look like a real building.
Wow, it's beautiful. Matt, what do you love about this photo, or this rendering?
I think, Henry touched on it pretty well, which is kind of the magic. Before we worked on this competition, we did a lot of research on who the stakeholders were going to be, or the jury. And in this particular instance, it was a lot of museum curators. And so it was important for us that we were tailoring our rendering to resonate with the jury specifically. And, in that sense, we wanted to really show that this building was kind of a public display of their archive. And so, in that first image, we really kind of worked out the geometry in the building and the partie of these kind of monolithic bookshelves that are kind of cutting radially through the space. But it's a little bit lifeless at the moment. It's like there's no light in the eyes, is kind of what we say. And so Henry was able to kind of put that sparkle, kind of fill it in with the art pieces that they had in their collection, kind of make it glowing, kind of make it inviting, and really demonstrate that kind of interface between the public and the private that we were going for.
Matt, you went outside. I mean, Henry is obviously an independent, a consultant. How do you, as a small firm, though, make the decision to spend on additional visual assets?
That is a good question. It's a tough question. It always depends on a few key factors, which is a cost benefit analysis, where if we're going to invest in someone on the outside, does it make sense financially? Is it going to give us a better chance at winning? Is it going to give us a better outcome? Does it free up staff that's internal to maybe continue to work on the model? And so in this instance, that's exactly what it was. We, in that first rendering, we sent that to Henry as a background and kind of set that view. And we said, Henry, start doing the sky, start doing the entourage, start kind of adding the magic. And we're going to keep kind of furiously modeling in the background and, refining the bookshelves and refining the louver pattern, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, if we didn't have Henry there, we would have been down essentially one staff member who would have been spending, hours doing this Photoshop. So it's a bit of a crutch. It kind of, it gives you additional manpower or woman power when you need it.
Well, and then in the end result, you have this is a beautiful addition to your portfolio. But I think that communication is so key to find the right person. I want to quickly move along and let's unpeel the next layer of this onion, because as we continue to talk about visualization, Henry, you are allowing us you gave us a video of some animation. Video really is almost the next step that architects are using as a tool. And I want to bring Paul Vu back into this conversation because he also uses video. So Henry, let's take a look at your this animation and let's watch it and describe what we're seeing.
Sure. This animation is really just a time lapse of freehand illustration that I started doing in the recent years. I pivoted away from the digital 3D rendering into the freehand sort of illustration because I do have this art background, and I saw there was a return on more analog because renderings are just everywhere. They're kind of expected in every presentation. And I started to work with interior designers, architects, and developers, and helping them do these illustrations that are very quickly to produce and also very effective. So a lot of the things that you saw was, it came from a very simple masking model, if you will. And I could add in a lot of design and architecture components just in drawing because it's so much quicker to do things in the drawing format. And the best thing is this is all done on iPad Pro with Apple Pencil. Whereas before traditional illustrators are used to working on paper, which had limitations on things that you can revise. Once you watercolor something, it's very hard to take out the color on the paper. But with the digital kind of a platform, you can pretty much revise as many times as you want. So this kind of collaboration was very valuable to all kinds of architects and interior designers that they often say, can you change the little tree a little bit? Can you change this window? And for me, that was very quick to do on the iPad because I'm used to working with layers. So this is just really powerful way to not illustrate, but to design and document your process. And recently I've started to teach my workflow and my process and techniques on the YouTube channel that Sydnie mentioned. So I encourage you to check it out.
Wonderful. Paul, tell me, we've seen your beautiful photography, but how are you using video now? And are you seeing more applications with your clients?
Yes, we absolutely are. What's happening is that in the same way that I got into photography, the tools are more accessible. The work is now cross-pollinating with other, beyond just the architectural industry, a lot more readily with things like social media. And so firms of different sizes are leaning into film more, and sometimes I'm surprised by who asks. And honestly, we were very happy just doing stills photography. And when more and a few clients asked, I was like, we cannot ignore this. And so it's something that we have to put in our toolkit and work on. I was watching nowness videos and all kinds of things that were hybrid content between being short art films and cultural pieces and all of that. So that's about when we started doing it.
And Matt, as the business owner, when do you make that call as far as whether you're going to use film or video versus staying with renderings?
It's really up to the collaboration, because sometimes some clients that are familiar with us or have followed us for a while will say, we trust you, if you have time or bandwidth to do something else, surprise us, you know, give us whatever else. Like we don't always know what we need to do next. We're busy doing the architecture component. You know, we haven't spent as much time thinking about the visual component and the media and all that. And so we always sit down and talk about budget and, you know, what's special about the projects. Film allows you to show certain things that you can't in photography, like showing more of the context around the neighborhood. Sometimes if there's like really great landscaping, like you would see here, like maybe you would do a little close up of just the path, you know, and you'd roll focus and you would do something with that to create a storytelling narrative sequence that photos alone, usually like if we have 5 or 6 photos, I can't sneak one of those in there because there's only so much room.
And let's talk too about the tools that all of you are using that maybe you didn't use 10 or 12 years ago. You know, Paul, you know, Henry, what, you know, you talked about doing things on an iPad with a pencil. I mean, Paul, have you added tools to your arsenal?
I use my iPhone a lot, actually. So I made sure to get the one with the Pro with the wider lens, so that now when we do site visits and things like that, before we actually show up for the day of the shoot, I can focus more on just narrative and working with the director, whoever's there with me that will be guiding me through the shoot. And we can use things like the phone to sneak into little corners. They get really low really quickly, and I don't have to worry about the focus and composition of my equipment as much. I use it to do solar calculations and studies on site right away, so we have a sense of agency and we're working collaboratively together. And then a lot of Adobe and things like that for the work afterwards.
And Henry, what about your tools?
Well, I started with drawing on trace paper and scanning it, putting it into Photoshop and aligning it to make a beautiful sketch. That was what I was doing initially, maybe like 5 to 10 years ago. But then you have this Wacom tablet, which is nice, but it was more kind of limited to, you have to connect it to the computer. So you always have to have the computer with you. But the iPad is just so amazing. You can take it with you anywhere you go. It's so portable with a pencil. So now I find myself working, kind of like everywhere at home or even outside, sometimes in like an Uber ride. So that portability really allows you to be creative everywhere, and you're not limited to the hardware you have. So that really frees you up with more white space to design and illustrate for me.
And Matt, for you with your staff in-house, have you sort of upped the game with your technology and tools as to what you use? I know you mentioned when I spoke earlier with you about even having virtual reality goggles one day.
Yeah, certainly. I think as Paul mentioned earlier, the barriers to entry to some of these kind of typically more prohibitive kind of industries, which is VR and motion, have started to come down and become more democratic. So it's a lot easier to either engage with somebody to produce something for you, or to, in some cases, do it in-house. I think really for us, when we're looking to do something that's maybe more immersive or motion-based, we turn toward Lumion. And so what we're doing a lot these days is kind of VR renderings of kind of early concept stages. So it's really, really effective for kind of high-end renovations or new construction. And you basically pick a point in your model and you can render a 3D sphere or a walkthrough. And then you can hand your client or your stakeholders a VR headset or an iPad, and you can kind of position them roughly on site where you've taken that rendering in your model, and they can actually kind of hold the iPad up and orbit around, or look around in the VR glasses. And it's a fantastic marketing tool. I think it's clients love it, but it also is maybe the best way to represent a space. I think as Paul mentioned earlier, still images can be a little bit constraining, especially if your design is more complex or nuanced. You can kind of take out those handcuffs with the transition to motion.
I mean, it's fascinating. You think things in the real world are changing in every world, the architectural world, whether it's the tools or the technology and how people see things. I want to leave some time for Q&A and wrap up and say this hour really was about messaging, but messaging, especially in the architectural world, isn't just about words. I wanted to spend a lot of time on, the visuals and the pictures. No architect, I'm sure, has ever sold a project by explaining it on a piece of paper. Maybe so, maybe like VCs in Silicon Valley or something. But I mean, it's the visuals. It's the visuals. So my takeaways for today would be, paint a picture with words. Paint the picture that you want by speaking to the audience in their language. I mean, find the interpreter on your team or you hire one. I mean, to me, this is a great joint exercise over coffee or cocktails or lunch with your team. Work as a team. Throw the difficult language out there and tell everybody, listen, I've got to present this to a public hearing. So let's work as a team to develop different translations for different audiences. And it's a lot of fun. There's some, it's just amazing when you offer the chance to be creative, as far as there's some really smart people when it comes to messaging, and maybe they have another job, but do it as a team. It can be a lot of fun. The other one, edit to engage. You want to keep your message in context by tailoring it to the medium, the platform, the audience. Figure out where your message works best and then change it. If you're doing a PowerPoint, keep it simple. But if you're giving a takeaway, you can give more detail, something that they can sit and read. And then finally, use those visualization tools to stand out. I mean, it's architectural illustration, animation. Use those things to convey ideas so the audience, no matter who or where it is, can really imagine what this design is going to look like. What is it going to look like? How is it going to feel? So I can't believe we've already, on 45 minutes, 15 minutes into this, we've gotten so much, but we want to open it up to chat. If you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll get to it. But as we do that, just a number of people to thank here who have helped us put this all together. It takes a staff, it takes a team, it takes a village. And I also wanted to give some contact information for Matt and Henry and Paul as well. Take a look at their websites or YouTube channels. Very, very, very interesting. And they've added so much more than me, droning on about something. I would love to bring in the experts and learn something myself. But as we've got a quick question here from George. Question to Henry. How can students who don't have an art background develop sketching skills? How can hybrid sketches help with that development?
Thanks, George. That is a good question. And on my YouTube channel, one of the things that I talk about is how do you improve your sketching? And there's really no way around it besides sketching more. Malcolm Gladwell, who's this famous author, he wrote the book Outlier, and he talked about the 10,000 hours to be really good, or actually to achieve like the expert level, if you will. But I don't think most architects needs to, be that expert level kind of a craftsmanship. You only need to be good enough. And there are certain techniques that if you kind of like repeat over and over and practice more deliberately, that's going to help either students or working professional improve over time. It's not going to be like a one-night success, but if you keep at it, I think that aspect of freehand drawing is very valuable in someone's architectural kind of career. And I can kind of like attest to this in my architectural career, where I've had a lot of opportunities to participate on charrettes and design discussions where some of my peers that were maybe missing in this aspect of freehand drawing a little bit more. So practice. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Paul, I want to direct this question to you. You say you started out as an architect, but how did you find that passion for photography and knowing that there are some university students joining us today, what would your advice be as you move through this industry and you've kind of pivoted, what would your advice be as they start, in their architectural sort of design career, what to look for, what to be open to?
That's a great question. Like, what happened with me was, up until even 3 or 4 years ago, I thought I was going to be an architect, and it just didn't shake out that way because, certain things happened. I graduated in 2010 when we were still recovering from the financial crisis. And during school, I had done some competitions, architects are already good at not sleeping. But on top of that, I had certain aspirations and did some competitions and got some furniture built and went to Italy for the salon that they did in Milan every other year. And then the team that I was with actually saw the photographs I was taking and they said, we kind of like your photos more than the agency's photos right now. How about you start working for us? And so it actually presented itself to me, and I was just doing stuff and posting back then on Facebook. And then that gave me an opportunity to look into that as I started working as an architect. And then I realized that while I love being a designer, I'm not the best at delivering on all that architecture requires. And I saw that a lot of people spend too much time in front of their work to see it objectively and see the beauty anymore. They're lost in the weeds looking at the details. And so one of the advantages that I realized was that if I look at it less and come in at the right time, I can reintroduce magic to everybody, like whether they're seeing it for the first time or the 1,000th time coming out of the printer, at 24 by 36. So.
And Matt, I want to ask you, you're the person that, who you have to make the decisions on, where you spend your money, but I'll get to that question in just a second. You started at EHDD, and how the work that you did as whether it's an intern, a very junior person, how did that experience inform the rest of your career, being able to do a little bit of everything?
That is a good question. I think you hit the nail on the head, which is I was very fortunate to get, I would say, experience that wasn't that was maybe more than a junior designer would typically get. So I worked on a team of 2 or 3 on this massive $50 million aquarium down in Los Angeles, actually, and also great experience with kind of the marketing and the presentation building and. With Lisa specifically, who's on the line, built a lot of presentations for kind of bigger cultural and institutional projects that we were pitching. And so, through that process, I learned a lot about kind of picking your specific audience and tailoring your images and your copy to resonate or have kind of a great impact with them in order to kind of increase your chances of winning. And I think I even got to go in person and attend a few of the pitches, be in the boardroom with the CEOs of these companies. And, that was kind of a master class in watching these principals kind of, tweak their presentation and their talking points in real time as they kind of watch the reactions of the people that they were trying to sway. So, invaluable and lessons that I, use daily.
We've only got a few more minutes, but Matt, I got a question from the audience. Excuse me, this is for Paul, but all of you can, if you want to chime in, how much time do you spend on marketing versus shooting versus editing percentage-wise? Paul, I'll start with you because I think it was directed to you.
Okay.
But
yeah, I was typing it, but then this is great. Okay, so what happens is, honestly, we've been very referral based. We've been using social media a lot, things like Instagram the last few years. And sometimes we just sneak by a project and take a couple really high level photos for somebody. In that way, I actually got to work for Richard Meyer years ago because of a photo that I took of the Getty, of all places, very extensively documented already, but just, again, gave a surprise kind of view. And about a year later, they called. But we're starting to do marketing now. And honestly, a lot of the awards programs like the AAA that the AAA runs are how we get a lot of eyes on our work. because we're always referenced. You know, we help a lot of clients win awards and get published. So that's kind of, outreach is kind of done for us.
Wow, that's great. Just a few more minutes, but Matt, we want to talk about quickly, you know, you're co-founder of a small firm, you watch the bottom line. So how do you go about finding someone like a Henry or a Paul to the person who will bring that magic to your designs?
You know, I think you're kind of looking for the right balance, the kind of the right type of person or company that blends like a high level of passion with a level of professionalism, but they're not too far down their career that they're unwilling to collaborate. So I think a Henry or a Paul is perfect in that sense, where they're, you know, they're maybe emerging is not the right word, but they are, you know, they're passionate, they're good at what they do, but it's not somebody who's on year 60 of his or her career and isn't going to kind of do the dance or work with you to kind of make something beautiful. Yeah, so I think that's probably the key advice I'd have.
Yeah, or innovate as well.
Yeah.
Anything else any of you want to add to our conversation? Just you know, just any tips for whether it's the students or the architects? And I know we've got some marketers.
Yeah. Sydnie, I do want to add to the marketers in the crowd, being one of you. For the principals and founders out there, your marketing team can be your objective eye, because they see your work differently. They're passionate about your work, but they're not so immersed in it that they can't step back. They write about your projects when they submit for awards. And so if you have in-house marketing staff, tap them, ask them what they think, because so often I think the marketing staff gets caught up in their own stuff and there's a perception or a misconception about what they can bring to the table. And so you have in-house resources for those of you that have marketing teams. Ask them.
And again, just like with Paul's career, how it took a turn. Invite everybody on the staff to work, say, with your messaging for different audiences. I think you might be surprised at the talent that is out there that's maybe unseen or unsung. And I think that there's probably a lot more talent on some of the teams and staffs than you realize. But open up these opportunities to them, and you never know where it will lead. So I think this is a great place to end it all. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. Corinne and Jessica at AIA LA, and of course, Matt and Henry and Paul, thank you so much for taking the time. I love it. This was a great conversation. And a quick thank you to my co-collaborator, Lisa Boquiren. I mean, she truthfully is the real architect of this event, and she works her own incredible magic with words and crafting story presentations. So Lisa, we've worked together for more than 20 years, and it's wonderful. It drags me kicking and screaming into these things, and I get so excited about them. So thank you.